Hey, I'm Johnny. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about conducting a podcast audit. Now, I know you don't want to do the podcast audit. You kind of just want to do your show, continue what you're doing, achieve your goals, and things are going fine, right? Are they? They probably are. Well, I think it's smart to actually conduct a podcast audit on at least a yearly basis, because the problem and the reason why you don't want to do the podcast audit is we get into kind of a autopilot mode with our show. And that's especially true when we're podcasters who are hosts of shows that are not our full-time gig. This is either a small piece of our marketing and branding solution. It is something we like to do on the side for fun. It's not our main focus in life. So why are we going through the trouble of auditing our podcast? Well, there's a reason you're doing the podcast. It has to bring you some kind of value. So if you kind of just let it die on the vine by just scheduling episodes without really thinking about it, not putting a ton of thought into the guests that you're going to be having on or the topics that you're going to be discussing for that next episode, well, what are we really even doing? Why are we even doing the podcast? So again, this is something that the clients that I work with, this is something that I encourage them to do every single year. It's kind of just a reflection just to get you in the mindset of being really deliberate when you're approaching every episode of your podcast. So we'll get into that now. So first, if we're doing this yearly, the first thing you want to think about is the past year of the show. How did that go? Are you achieving your goal? And when I say goal, I mean that there should be one tangible thing that you're getting out of your podcast. Some examples could be you work in some kind of sales and your podcast is a way to get your foot in the door with people who could become potential clients. So you have them on as guests. Now you have that warm, relationship with them, and you're able to potentially sell them on your product. 2, it's helping drive customers to whatever company you're working for, and you want to convert listeners into customers, whether you're selling a physical product, a service, something like that. Thirdly, you're building this up as part of your branding, your personal branding. You have some kind of course you want to sell. It's some kind of indirect funnel to get people to you, the host, to buy whatever it is that you're selling. So those are just a few reasons why you would have a podcast or some kind of goal that you would have, but you need to have some kind of goal. And it could just be, I want to do it because it's fun. That's perfectly fine too. But there should be one tangible goal. So you think about the past year, are we achieving that goal? Why or why not? And the reason you're thinking about this is maybe your goal actually changed. And if so, when did that goal change? Why did it change? And does your show need to evolve in some way, shape, or form to reflect what your new goal is? Now, what we want to do is look at some of our highest and lowest performing podcast episodes from the past year to see if there is anything that we can either duplicate or remove from our processes. So what you're going to want to do is go to your analytics platform. You'll pull your top 3 episodes, maybe based on downloads. That's probably the most, the best general overall metric to use is the top 3 most downloaded episodes from the past year, not of all time, just the past year. And you're going to want to see if there are any correlations across those 3 episodes. Was it the type of guest, maybe the industry that your guest worked in, that made that really resonate with your audience? Maybe it was the topic that you talked about. Was there some relation between those 3? Finding some kind of link between those top performers. And it may not be to have to do with the guest. Maybe it was you upgraded your technology. You got a little bit better production value going. You implemented a lot more information into your show notes. There's something there between those 3 top episodes that you can duplicate and maybe pull certain things that you can now drop into every single episode. What did I do in those 3 episodes that I can replicate across every episode going forward? And you also want to do the same thing with your lowest performing episodes. What do we not want to do going forward? What happened in those episodes that made the episode not perform well? And it could be something like I released it on Christmas Day, or I released it on 4th of July, and it just did really poorly. So now going forward, we don't release on holidays. It's little things like that. But again, it could be the type of guest. We want to avoid that guest's field or subject or topic in the future because it just doesn't resonate with my audience. And you kind of tinker away at what your audience really wants to hear from you, and you can replicate that going forward. Okay, last thing, improving our show notes. This is the easiest way to audit your podcast and make real improvements going forward into the new year. And all this requires of you is a little bit more of your time. I know that having a podcast on the side almost feels like a full-time job. And why would you want to add more work onto yourself? Well, you're really doing this for the people that are listening to your podcast. They are trading their most valuable asset to you, which is their time. And with the amount of media and consumption, whatever, the amount of shit that you can look at today, time is a very valuable asset. And if they're spending their time listening to you, if you can give them more value to convince them to give you more of their time, that's all the better. And the easiest way to do that is by bettering or improving your show notes. And the first thing that I would recommend implementing is just chapter marks or time codes. And that is basically marking down every single time a shift in the conversation happens. You ask them a new question, you pivot to another part of the discussion. Marking those down is going to give the listener a lot more insight into what you actually talked about beyond what most podcasts do, which is just the 2 paragraphs. Hey, here's who this person is, and here's 2 or 3 things that we talked about. And while a potential listener may not be super interested in the headline of the episode that they see, this guest works in biotechnology, but they scroll down and look in the show notes and see that, oh, we actually talked about how that's going to affect the everyday working person going into 2025. That's something that I really care about. So I'm just going to jump to that section and listen to that section of the podcast. So it's a really easy thing to implement. You kind of just mark it down as you go, or you do it in post, or if you have a producer, you can have them do it for you. The next way to improve your show notes is making your call to action extremely clear in both the audio and the written description of the episode. And this is just asking the listener to do one thing. If you listen to a lot of podcasts, you'll hear the host go, well, go subscribe to the podcast and go check us out here and go follow us there. And, look at my website and stuff. We want to just boil it down to the easiest thing possible. You've already convinced this listener to give you their time. Now you want to take another step forward, and now I want you to go do something. The conversion rate of that is already, you put out your episode to everyone on your social media feed. Now a much smaller percentage of that is going to see it, and even much smaller percentage of that is going to click on that and then listen to the podcast. And then an even smaller percentage of that is going to look at your call to action and take action on it. So we need to be really clear and really deliberate on what our call to action is, whether that's this is totally your prerogative. What do you want your listener to do? Do you want them to go to your website? Do you want them to follow the show, which is what subscribe is? They changed it. I don't know why. Follow the show, go follow you on social media. Just pick the one thing that's really valuable to you. And you can even interchange this over, a few months. You can try a few months of doing in your intro or in your show notes of, hey, go follow the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you can change it to go follow me on Twitter or check out my website. But make sure it's one, and make sure it's really easy for them to find in the show notes. The link's right here. All you got to do is just tap it. Another really important way to improve your show notes is to just hyperlink the important stuff, meaning articles, books, websites, podcasts, people even that get mentioned in the conversation that a listener might be interested in learning a little bit more about. Hyperlinking to whatever you're talking about and putting that in the show notes and making it really clear what that was is super valuable. Now, put this all together for a second. We've got our hyperlinks, we've got our call to action is really clear, and we've got our time codes. Now, compare that in a podcast to just the 2 paragraphs that you would see in another show that you typically listen to. When you put those 2 episodes side by side, one is clearly much more valuable looking than the other. You've put a little bit of extra work, yes, into the episode, but just before the episode has even been listened to by somebody looking at it, they can see that you've put a lot more effort into your podcast, and it seems much more professional. So improving your show notes is the easiest way to improve your podcast going into the new year. Finally, just like your favorite season of Yellowstone or any Netflix show or whatever the hell you've been watching online, it's time to improve your intro and outro. Cut it down in length. It's probably too long as it is right now, but we want to get to the meat of the episode as quickly as possible. So state your call to action, who you are, what your show is, and what it's about, and then right into the episode. Even if you feel like you don't need to change up your intro, it's perfect the way it is, just get it re-recorded in some clean audio, or you can even hire a professional voiceover artist on Upwork or Fiverr to do it for you. And that just gives that little extra sense of pizzazz or professionalism in your podcast. That's it. That's how you do a really quick audit for your podcast going into the new year. I hope you found some value in this. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it. See, look at me, not even following my own advice. One call to action, subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.